Gun control works, plain and simple. For all their talk about facts over feelings, this is one area where Republicans run away from the facts. For example, what you find within the United States is that as the percent of gun ownership increases, the firearm death rate goes up right along with it. It's a direct correlation. Internationally, you see the exact same thing, where among developed countries, the higher the rate of gun ownership, the higher the gun death rate. It's a direct correlation. Now, Republicans, when they see these graphs, sometimes they'll respond by saying, "Hang on a sec, mister, you're looking at gun deaths overall here. This includes gun suicides and accidental discharges." And I'm like, okay, it's still a fucking dead person, isn't it? It's still somebody that accidentally shot themselves with a gun. Like, how is that person any less dead? How is that any less relevant? Sometimes they'll respond by saying, well, you gotta understand, somebody who's determined to kill themselves, they'll find a way regardless. Again, completely ignoring the facts on this. What you find is that if a person tries to kill themselves with a firearm, there's an 85% chance that they'll succeed. Compare that against all other methods of trying to kill yourself, only 5% succeed in those cases. What this means is that somebody is 17 times more likely to successfully kill themselves using a gun than any other method. So they're just completely wrong about this point. Republicans will also say, oh yeah, well if you get rid of the guns, then criminals will just switch to knives instead. And I'm like, okay, even if you were correct on this point, knife attacks are much less deadly than gunshot wounds. Just look at the stats on this. What you find is that gunshot wounds are 8 times more likely to kill somebody than a stab wound. So this would still mean less death overall. Something else you'll see Republicans do in response to this data is they ignore the overall big picture trends here, and they instead just cherry pick these isolated data points that support their case. They'll say, oh yeah, what about this state? What about this city here? This appears to contradict what you're saying. And I'm like, dude, we're talking about the big overall picture here. You know, there's always going to be outliers in any data set, and the way that it works in science and data analysis is that you don't just pick and choose the data that supports your case. You look at the big picture overall trend here. And when you do it that way, it's very clear what the conclusion is. Something else you'll see is Republicans using misleading metrics to support their case here. A graph that gets tossed around a lot, it shows the number of guns within the United States compared against the firearm homicide rate over time. The thing is, this is not a good metric to use because number of guns, it doesn't correlate to the percent of people that are gun owners. You can have one redneck who has 1,000 fucking guns in a shack or something, and it's going to distort and inflate the data in this way. A better metric to use here is the percent of gun owners within the country. And if that's what you use, what you find is there's a direct correlation here between the percent of people that own a gun and the firearm homicide rate. The bottom line is that the more laws a state passes related to gun control, the lower their firearm death rate. These are the facts about gun control. And as Republicans love to remind us, facts don't care about your feelings.